Coercion is necessary, as I've discussed already. However, coercion is also problematic. Coercion relies on rules, and rules can be dysfunctional. For example, work to rule refers to the sanctions imposed on management by disgruntled employees. While organizations set rules for employees to follow that ensure that the work is performed safely, some organizations rely on employee initiative and bending those rules for the organization to be effective. In some instances, if employees stick rigidly to the rules, then there can be negative consequences in terms of productivity. It is very difficult for management to discipline employees who are working as they should or according to rules. Also, targets can become thresholds or limits whereby employees work to a target but do no more when they are not rewarded for achieving more than the target set. Moreover, coercion is only effective when management know more than workers, and this is a problem for managers of highly skilled professionals. It is only effective when work is easily monitored. And it is only effective if the consequences of coercion are feared by employees. Read the article by Burrowoy and Wright. Why are management knowledge, ease of monitoring, and fear of consequences so important? Think about these and bring your ideas to class. Coercion also depends on managers being able and prepared to coerce workers. Remember the performance appraisal lecture and managerial reluctance to pass judgment. Finally, we should not assume that employees always consent to coercion. They can also resist. Informal and formal resistance to managerial authority can have consequences for management and the organization that range from inconvenience to dire consequences. Read this slide on why workers consent to management authority and why it is important to enhance worker consent. We can discuss this further in class. For now, I want to emphasize the argument that workers will work in the interests of the firm because their own interests are served by doing so, and consequently, it is important for management to ensure that employees understand how their efforts benefit them. Once again, there's a lot of text on this slide and you can read through this at your leisure. I won't discuss this here, but we can return to this in class. I will emphasize 2 points, however. Consent is not the absence of conflict, merely that workers believe their interests are best served by cooperation. And consent can be withdrawn by workers at any time. Think about how management might enhance consent. What policies encourage workers to believe their interests are aligned with those of the organization? I will talk about participation and consent, but what other HRM policies might be effective? Bring your ideas to class. Participation is one means by which the organization can harness consent. I've ordered several common forms of participation according to the degree of influence they offer employees. At the top of this figure is co-determination, where workers have representatives on the board of directors. This is a common practice in continental Europe, legally mandated for large organizations. It has been argued, most notably by Wolfgang Streeck, that a high degree of employee influence is beneficial to the organization as it imposes beneficial constraints on managerial choice. That is, employee voice prevents management from taking decisions that provide short-term benefit, but that could do long-term damage to the organization. Consultative committees are formed within organizations to give employees a collective voice, usually in place of trade unions. Partnership and collective bargaining usually involve a trade union. Trade unions are defined in the slide. I'm referring to trade unions in the global north here that are independent of management and provide employees with a collective independent voice. It is argued that collective voice is more effective than individual voice for employees. Why is that? Bring your ideas to class. The two faces of unionism are presented in the slide. Essentially, the monopoly face of unions position holds the trade unions are fundamentally bad for business and indeed for society by artificially inflating the wages of members. The institutional face has it that trade unions are actually good for business because they provide workers with an effective voice. Workers express their voice to management, thereby resolving a problem and making the organisation more efficient, rather than leaving the organisation and taking with them their tacit knowledge, leaving the problem behind. Partnership was a popular strategy in the 1990s in liberal market economies and remains influential today, albeit as employee engagement. Partnership commonly involves developing a more positive relationship with trade unions, whereby management and trade unions work cooperatively in the best interests both of the organisation and of the worker. Partnership is built on reciprocal recognition by management and trade unions of each other's legitimate interests, and focuses on the common interests of each party, that is, the success of the organisation, so that that success may be shared. There is a joint commitment to resolve differences in an atmosphere of trust and to work in the interests of all concerned, not simply in the interests of shareholders. The outcomes of partnership are mixed, and the context in which the partnership was agreed is critical in determining those outcomes. Partnerships have failed where they've been agreed in the context of dire economic performance or in organisations that have a history of antagonism between management and employees.